Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tales of the Sail, episode 33, Timber and Sail. It is November. There's a chill in the air. There's a possibility that I might get a snow day tomorrow, which I'm very excited about if it happens, but I suspect it's going to be rain, in which case I get to put a sign up on my window that tells the kids that they are never going to escape from this place. Broadcasting from three separate locations are my normal co-host here, Glenn, the gentleman farmer Van Meter.
Hey, everybody.
I am Tom Chairborn Mullane, and we are joined by special guest Jason Klotz from Timber and Sail. Jason, say hi.
Hey, glad to be here.
We are going to jump around and talk about what we have been up to in the time since we last recorded. I failed spectacularly to get the episode out quickly because I got overwhelmed by school-related nonsense. But that shouldn't be a problem. So my hope is that as we record this in mid-November, it will be out in time for you to listen to over your Thanksgiving turkey. If this is something you decide to play for your family while you're all eating, then we're very flattered. But I don't think that that's the case. You're probably listening to us while you're painting or in the car or Lord knows where.
Although if any random uncles decide to try and get into politics, you might want to just put us on as like a calming
Yeah, just use
distraction.
this like Adele in that SNL skit where just putting her on just derails any argument. So I would say let's go Glenn first. We'll go out of order based on what it is. I'm just gonna screw things up here. You want me to go first?
No, I'll go. So right off the bat, I'm continuing to work on my Secret Santa. That is due December 1st, I think. We got to get it out soon. So I'm going to be finishing that up during paint night in a couple days, which this podcast will come out after that. So you probably already talked to me there if you got on there, but if not, just know that we have that every third Friday of the month. I have also been 3D printing like mad. That is one of my many hobbies now. I've got a lot of cool STLs that I really want to get printed, and I'm looking forward to continuing to try stuff,
Did you
including
tell me you were printing like crates and barrels and stuff like that, or you found good FTLs for those?
I'm printing everything. But yes, crates and barrels and other small pieces of scenery. If you ever make it to any of our conventions or tournaments, rather, you may start to see 3D printed things showing up on the tables. I even got like a fake wood filament, which I didn't realize is twice as expensive as the normal stuff because they kind of hid the fact that it's half a roll. But yeah, it's just like it's wood grain filament, so I can just print it and it looks kind of like wood. So I'm
Oh,
I'm
that's
gonna
so
try that on
cool.
the barrels and see see if I have to bother painting them.
I might commission some of those from you.
I think I think it's the same stuff that the Extrusion Terrain Company or those guys out of Australia, Extruded Terrain, I think.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I've
yeah,
seen
I think
those. I think you
so.
sent
You've
them to
seen
me.
those barrels that I have and Tyler has, so I think it's the same material.
Yeah, those are awesome. I think you gave me a few of those last time I was down there.
Maybe I have no recollection. I have so much stuff. But yeah, I'm 3D printing is awesome. It's a great way to get a lot of models. I would say for cheap, but there are investment costs. But like once you get a lot of the stuff set up, like me printing a single 28 millimeter mini costs about an hour and a half of my time and 7-8 cents in materials. But I'm doing FDM printing, which you got to do a lot of tweaking to get the appropriate what do you call it? The appropriate detail on like a 28 millimeter mini. FDM printers are mostly good for like terrain. Resin printers are what you really want for minis, and they are not 8 cents a mini. They're going to be a bit more because resin costs more. Jason, you've got some experience.
Yep, I've printed I don't even know, literal boatloads of terrain over the years, and I've gotten into designing some stuff. I've got a couple of things that I've done for Oak and Iron and Blood and Plunder that are just 100% custom that I've built from scratch with some CAD apps. But um, I can field more terrain than my wife cares to see in the attic.
Oh, Jason, I have to tell you a quick story. Like I asked for my wife's help because my office was a mess and I was kind of overwhelmed. So I she works from home and she had a lot of free time because she didn't have a lot of clients. And I told her, oh yeah, if you want to clean out like my office, you're welcome to do that. So she started to dig through it, and oh, she found some stuff. And when when I came home, she's like, I need you to understand that if you ever tell me you need more miniatures again, you you don't. Like don't ask me if you should get this because you should know the answer is no. And I was like, well, I'm glad she didn't look at the basement because then it's all organized in plastic boxes and she hasn't even gotten to that pile yet. So I share your pain in terms of hidden terrain and fun projects that scatter all over the place. But so I'm impressed with both of you because I didn't realize we had that much collective knowledge in terrain building. How hard was it for you to use the software to design your own stuff? Because
So I soaked. It's kind of an interesting question. I soaked probably 20 or 40 hours in teaching myself a specific CAD application, had probably 40 or 60 different designs done. And then the company that I was using their software with was cloud based, and they went belly up and didn't give any warning. So I lost way more hours of my life than I care to admit. But um,
ugh,
I've since, Tinkercad is a good starting platform. You might be interested in pushing that to some of your students, but it's got some basic tools and some things to learn, and then you can kind of build on your skills from there. And it really depends on what you're doing. Oak and iron scale stuff is really small, so it doesn't have quite as much detail. If you start getting into bigger things, 28 millimeter scale, then it's definitely a time sink. A lot of times there's tons of STL files that are out there, and as long as you pay attention to the licensing, some of them will allow you to tweak it so you can download somebody else's design and add to it, or modify it, or make it a little more historical and get rid of some of the fantasy elements if you're hardcore historical, or if you want the fantasy stuff, just leave it in there and go with what you got.
yeah, I'm gonna check that out. Like, it's intimidating. I feel like I'm not somebody who naturally takes to
Yeah,
like programming, or
there's definitely a learning curve.
I'm not a math guy. So
That's on the designing end. On the I
Yeah.
just want to take stuff off Thingiverse and print it. Like I got I okay, so I got an Ender 3D, which is like one of the or Ender 3, not 3D. It's one of the more common extrusion printers, and I got it for $200 at a local store. It was a chain store. Um, and a roll of filament cost about 20 bucks. And I brought it home, built it. I made a couple of tiny upgrades based on some YouTube stuff that cost me all of $10. And since then, I've just been printing like crazy. There's some YouTube tutorials you can watch on like how to do stuff better, but for the most part, this stuff is fairly plug and play as far as printing terrain. Now, designing minis takes a lot more, and that's something I'm probably eventually going to get into. But for right now, I'm happy to just take things and print them.
and Glenn, just to pick up where we were in terms of like debriefing stuff, what else have you been keeping busy with?
Yes. Well, I ran the Fallen Masts tournament at Fallen about a week and a half ago. Figured we'd go over the winners real quick. Preston Jacka took first.
Good for Preston.
Yes, he actually. I'll get back to that in a second. Fernando Arteaga took second, and Joe Richards, who won the destination tournament, he took third. Cool stuff that happened in the tournament, or cool lists. This tournament was different because some of our other sea tournaments were more of everybody shows up with a single ship. Usually it's a sloop or a brig or a tartana, brigantine, or a tartana, and everybody fights. And we've occasionally had like Paragua lists, that kind of stuff. This time around, everybody showed up with proper ships except Preston and Adam Johnston showed up with 2 ships each. We also had Fernando showed up with a full-size galleon, which was very interesting. Um, it was a 200-point tournament, so it was really squeezing things to get that on the table. We try to pick fair scenarios, but at some point he turned that thing into the straight into the wind,
Come and get me.
and he had trouble. Yeah, as far as sailing goes, I don't think he really recovered after that. However, um, his crew, galleons are just hard to board. So even though I think that game was actually against Joe Richards, even though Joe came up behind him and tried to board from the rear gallery, he just didn't make it. So
Question: Did you
yes,
guys were using the new artillery rules, right?
we were using the new artillery rules. Another friend of the show, Garrett Swader, round 1, turn 3. I guess he had somehow presented his opponent had turned and was just broadsiding him the whole time. But his ship was sunk like a foot and a half away from the enemy vessel, turn 3. It was just over. He'd lost 3 men up until that point, and then his ship was sunk, which he had a sloop, if I recall. Or no, he was running a Tartana. So not exactly heavy on hit points, 13 of them, but yeah, it went down. The two ship lists were pretty interesting. Seeing those work. Like I said, Preston ended up winning with one of them. He actually ended up playing Tyler in the final round and pulled an excellent maneuver where Tyler was beam on beam with him, pouring fire into Preston. And this was where you had to get to an island and take an objective. Tyler was kind of ignoring the objective and just trying to get Preston's vessel, I believe. And Preston threw his sloop just into the wind, which caused it to come to a sudden halt. Tyler kept sailing on, and then the next turn, he had gone into the wind so little that the drift backward put him back into the wind, or put him back windward, but not into the wind. So he went under sail again immediately, and it was just enough to give him 8 to 10 inches of maneuvering room between him and Tyler. So it was an interesting, nice little sailing maneuver that I got to see.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What did Tyler bring?
I want to say he had an elite sloop. There were 9 players. We had 11 ships because 2 of the players had 2 ship lists. And I did a count. Of those 11 ships, 7 were the standard sloop. So to everybody who always asks, what's the best ship to get into the game, etc., we're going to keep telling you the most well-rounded ship to play at mid-level games is probably still the sloop.
The sloop.
It's got that nice cannon layout, because I know Adam was running 2 sloops with 4 medium cannon and 2 light cannon each. Preston's list was... Oh, I've probably said his name way too many times. Oh.
No, he's been summoned. It's only a matter of time before he pops into this channel while we're recording.
I realized.
Well, he won the tournament. It was inevitable that you were going to bring up his name multiple times.
Yeah. So, anyways, he ran a all medium gun sloop and a Tartana that was kitted for boarding. But keep in mind, at 200 points, 2 different full-size fighting ships. They're both running with smaller crews. You're going pretty light on crew there to make it work. There were other players, a couple people first tournament. Like I said, Garrett Swader came up from Georgia. That was fun having him up here and going to the convention with him.
Did you get to do anything else at the con, or no? I know that the Firelock guys weren't there, right? It was
No.
Was Phalanx there? Was Phalanx Consortium there?
They were, but they didn't actually have any Blood and Plunder stuff with them, if I recall. The only
That's a
stuff,
bummer.
the only Blood and Plunder was at my hobby place, your hobby place. I got some decent deals in the vendor hall, and I was in the flea market selling off a lot of my old 40K stuff, where I made a little bit of money. Didn't sell the stuff that I had taken specifically to sell, which was Dystopian Wars. I sold all that online afterwards.
Well, you got rid of it though. That's a win.
Most of it, yeah. I got a little bit left that I don't know if anybody's interested in, but and my friend Carl designed a game called Downsync that he's designed and printed his own minis for. So he's designed the game, designed the minis, etc. And we all got to try playing that, which it's a pretty good game. If you like sci-fi stuff, reach out to us. I'll be able to hook you up with him because he's still running demos and testing and things like that. But it's a cool little game where you have secret movement. You move ping markers around, and then only once they're revealed can you find out what they are. Yeah, so it's as much about maneuver as it is about actually killing enemy units. It's always cool to go to cons and try all the new games that are coming up and that people are inventing. Anyways, what have you been up to, Tom?
Most of the stuff you see listed on the show notes involve school related disasters. I would say my wife and I had our 11th wedding anniversary, so we got to go see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child last weekend.
Definitely sounds like a school disaster.
That was the only positive thing. Other than that, we had somebody fired for gross teaching misconduct, and the sheriff's office has had to do multiple like lockdown drills because I think somebody in the neighborhood threatened to like come in. So it's an adventure here in the American public school system.
I thought you taught at a bougie school.
I thought so too, Glenn. I thought so too, but every day is an adventure. I'm happy I work with the people I work with. I like my students this year. I think they're a lot of fun. I do have a much larger military history class than I've had the past couple of years, so I have a nice full 18 kids, so we can do all sorts of games and stuff. So they're all playing diplomacy, and they're really into it. They're betraying each other. One kid got so mad after a move he slapped somebody.
I've heard that game will end marriages.
He just slapped somebody across the face. I will also say, excitingly, I don't think I brought this up in the last podcast, but those of you who listen to some of the other non-Tales of the Sale podcasts that we release, I would highly recommend you go check out episode 128, where Mitch interviews some guys from the U.S. Army's School of Advanced Military Studies, or SAMS. One of the things that SAMS did was basically, in order to teach their students about asymmetric warfare and some of the like basic lessons that they were trying to impart in terms of like overall strategic picture, they had them play Root, which for the uninitiated is a adorable little woodland creature game. Except,
I was gonna ask, is the Woodland Creatures game?
That's right, the Woodland Creatures game.
Nice.
It's a brilliant game. I bought a copy basically on the strength of that episode off of Amazon, and I brought it in, and I gave students extra credit for coming in to try it. So I got 4 kids that stayed after until 5 o'clock, played Root, and it was down to the wire. You had the raccoon robbing people. You had the birds almost winning and then falling apart 1 point shy of victory. They were cheering. It was intense, and they had a blast. So I had a lot of fun with the game. Highly recommend checking it out. Go check out Root, and check out the podcast because they really go into detail on how they're able to use this as a teaching tool, and I thought it was just really cool. So for any like teachers that listen to this, people that are looking for like fun things to do with your kids above the age of 13, I would say, then like it's a great gateway game for a lot of fun, like military stuff, but still has this really cute aesthetic. The art's really cool. So I had a blast playing with that. I haven't had a chance to do much painting. I was working on my 6th rate a bit and trying to use my airbrush, and that didn't go well, so I had to reprime it. And I was finishing up basing for some of my Irish Saga army. I got a bunch of warriors painted for that, and I cracked open the box, cleaned and primed all of my my English models. So I'm going to start working on the list for Fire on the Frontier that I wanted to build for like the Church's Raiders stuff. So that's what I've been doing.
Sorry to go back real quick. About how long does a game of Root take?
If you know what you're doing, 45 minutes to an hour. If you don't, hour and a half.
Okay. Next, you bring that with you the next time I see you at a convention, which at this rate is going to be in like 2025.
Oh no, I want to play it with you and Tyler and Mitch. It'd be hilarious. I think the only requirement was that like I would want to be the cats, because they're basically the capitalists, and I feel like that would really harass everybody. Just building as much wood stuff as I could all over the place.
I can hardly wait to hear what faction you think I would fit for.
You're the birds. You're definitely the birds.
They're not real though.
No, but they're kind of prickly.
Oh, okay.
They are
like a hedgehog.
Yeah, like a hedgehog, but like a lovable hedgehog. Like,
oh, okay, that's good.
Either that, or because of your farming roots, you might just be the Woodland Alliance, the underground network of mice and foxes that are trying to overthrow the government. So that might be more. That might be more.
You just said the magic words. All right, Jason.
Which brings us to Jason. So since it's Jason's first time on here, give us kind of the rundown on your gaming credentials. Like, what are how'd you get into tabletop gaming?
So I started probably in the beginning with D&D, and then branched into BattleTech and ran BattleTech for probably 20, 30 years. Still play on occasion, but I've played all kinds of miniatures games over the years. I started probably when I was 10, 12, and 44 now. So been around the block a few times and spent more money than I care to admit.
What brought you to Oak and Iron and the Firelock games?
I think the Kickstarter for Oak and Iron, I almost backed the initial Kickstarter of Blood and Plunder, and I resisted at the time. And kept pushing it away. And then I went ahead and backed Oak and Iron, thinking, okay, this will be a simple game, and I'll just buy the basics and get into it. And then got hooked. And I had bought another Kickstarter that has big stompy robots that I'm not going to mention again. And that took off. And I noticed that several of the items were going for double the value on eBay. And so I flipped my Kickstarter, tripled my money. And then I turned around and bought into Blood and Plunder.
Well, I will say that both Glenn and me, and also Mike Tunez, are BattleTech players. So every time we've had him on, I think he's brought it up. And
You're in good company.
You're in good company. There's several times on the paint nights when he's joined us. He's painting.
Oh, I don't. I tend to just run a variety of either Mercs or don't hate me, Comstar.
I knew he was Comstar.
Well, you know,
I could smell the Comstar on it.
Yeah. So
I knew it. I knew he was going to.
Yeah, because he runs a website. He's part of the internet.
He is part of the internet. Now,
Figures.
So follow up question. So you started out in D&D. You've done a lot of tabletop games. Have you always been into historicals? And also, is the time period...
I will say that Firelock probably pushed me into historicals. I've typically shied away from them. I'll play them at conventions, but a lot of times, no offense to your listeners, a lot of historical players tend to focus on certain elements of the game that are not part of the game, and they tend to be, what color was the uniform, or you didn't paint the belt buckle the right color. And so it's always been kind of a negative. So I kind of avoided a lot of the historical games and stuck mostly to sci-fi and fantasy stuff. But I've always had a soft spot for the golden age of piracy. So it's one of those. Blood and Plunder gnawed on me for a long time and demoed it a few times, and then finally, got into it through Oak and Iron as a gateway drug. And now I love both games and really love that whole genre. And it's pretty much taken over most of my time. Still play BattleTech on occasion, D&D on occasion, but
We can tell you love it because I think Joe Forrester basically said you contributed like 75% of the battle reports for Oak and Iron. It's some insane number.
that's over. Oh, for Oak and Iron,
I think
maybe
you single-handedly helped.
Well, no, that's still high, but it's a ridiculous number.
I think you
mean,
kept
don't
the
really
Dutch in
wanna
the
talk
game. I think
You
Glenn
did.
has you to thank for the
Just kidding.
fact that he didn't get completely embarrassed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, I think there were two of us that pretty
Yeah.
much carried the
And
majority of the Dutch.
unfortunately, I did not have anywhere near the amount of games to submit this year that I did last year because, like, having the 6-month-old, just I had no time. It was a very busy summer for us.
No, I had recently changed jobs, and so over the summer I have Fridays off, so I have one day that I just go nuts on gaming sometimes, or writing articles for the website, and just try to crank out a lot of content in a short amount of time. And then I stay up. I don't sleep a whole lot. I spend a lot of later evenings writing things or coming up with.
So I was going to ask you what else you have been up to recently, because we have a couple things I think you listed on our show notes. So tell us what you've been doing hobby-wise.
I just finished the Secret Santa for Blood and Plunder that Adam Horton was organizing. Shout out to him. Thank you for organizing that. This is the first time I participated in the Secret Santa for this game. I've done it in other systems, but this is I went a little bit different than, than what my person requested, so hopefully they don't hate it. It's got a little bit of a terrain element as a display piece, but it's also potentially functional. I don't know if you would want to use it in the game or not, but and then just a couple of minis engaged in a duel as part of that little setting. Using this recent Summer of Plunder event, I did take first. I used part of that money. I finally bought a galleon for Blood and Plunder, so broke down and bought that. Just got that, I guess, about 2 weeks ago. So I've primed it, but I haven't taken it any further. And I've tried to tell myself I'm going to finish my 6th rate and get it fully rigged before I start my galleon, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to resist that.
Yeah,
it's just such a huge, awesome looking model.
It really is. And,
yeah.
Oh my gosh, seeing one on the tabletop. So I tried to multiple times to post pictures live from the tournament, including pictures of Fernando's galleon beating up on various small craft. And unfortunately, none of them went through, which I found out later when I finally got home to a good internet connection. Like, nothing I had posted had stuck.
Ugh, that stinks.
Having that thing on a table where, like, it's 2.5 feet tall, 3 feet tall, like, it sticks out in a crowd, and it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it definitely turns heads. Anytime you go to any convention and you see the Blood and Plunder minis, it's always the ships that draw people in.
We were talking earlier about the 3D printing and stuff. Like, what's your current terrain project, either with 3D printing or otherwise?
So I just semi-recently finished a 28 millimeter scale tower known as Blackbeard's Tower. It's not actually Blackbeard's Tower, but it's sort of a halfway between like a scout tower and a lighthouse. It's based on a historical building, but then I've been fooling with Oak and Iron and trying to do some fortifications, to do some expansion rules, and potentially work with Fireloft to try to get some fortifications into the game. That kind of draws on some of the stuff that's in Fire on the Frontier for Blood and Plunder. Some of the buildings that are in that, converting them over to an Oak and Iron scale. So basically doing the 1/600 scale of a 4-star fort, 4-point star fort, some gun emplacements, and then just doing some generic buildings so that you've got some warehouses or some port type buildings, so you could build a little mini village or a city for some larger landmass type battles. Doesn't really affect the game necessarily for the buildings. It's just more of a flavor aspect for the game. But the fortifications, I've been working on some rough draft rules for that. To help bring them into Oak and Iron, because it's one element that doesn't currently exist in the game, and I think there's some room for that as an expansion set.
Well, I'd say if and when you have those like ready to actually premiere, if you had a chance to play test them, I'd say we definitely need to have you back on to talk about them, because I think, I would fiddle with them, because I have friends that have Oak and Iron stuff, but it's difficult to play when you've only done it a handful of times. I've only ever played at tournaments, at conventions. I always have a blast when I do, but it's just tricky to kind of to go through it. It plays really quick. It's very intuitive, I think, but it's tricky if you've only done it once or twice.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of true of a lot of miniatures games, and if it's not your primary focus and you wait 3 to 6 months, you've forgotten almost as much as you learned. So,
but I painted them all up; they look real pretty.
Definitely get that.
I know they're not up to probably some of the standards that I've seen on your site, but they look okay. I'm happy with the way they look. I got the yellow sails. I did some little details and stuff in trim work. So my Oak and Iron ships are looking pretty good.
Nice.
You're mentioning here reinventing the Summer of Plunder campaign wheel.
I think I typed that.
Oh, you
yeah.
did that.
I think okay. Glenn threw that in there. So Joseph and I have been kind of collaborating and putting together some rules and an outline for next year's Summer of Plunder. This year, I think it was an overwhelming success as an event for the community. We had, I don't know the final count, well over 1,000 games played, and a large number of people. It was a great recruitment tool. We got a lot of new Oak and Iron players, got a lot of new Blood and Plunder players. And so when we got to the end of the campaign, we put together a survey and sent it out to everybody that played and tried to interview some of the commanders and volunteers that were participating. And then we took some of that feedback and compiled it. And then I kind of took it and ran with it a little bit, and we've put together an interactive map. So I took Google Maps and I superimposed a historical map on top of it. So when you zoom into the map, it's not modern terrain. It's like an old 1700s brown historical looking map. So when you're looking at the cities or the locations, everything has got its historical name, and there are different location points that will belong to each of the factions. And so we're trying to integrate an element where the factions actually have some space to squabble over, rather than just playing games and dumping points into a spreadsheet. We're taking that and then putting it into an interactive map so that you can see kind of some change over the weeks of play of, maybe the Spanish capture certain cities.
I remember one of the cool, the cool elements that there was so there's an online campaign. I'm forgetting who ran it, but it might have been us. I don't know, but like for Flames of War, for Team Yankee, they had this thing where you could submit the battle reports, and they had like a window of opportunity to submit for like a region. And depending on the number of people that submitted battle reports and the number of wins for different factions, it could tip the tide and give them control of the territory. And then you'd have the commanders deciding to they get 2 moves into an area. And it was very fun to watch, because you got the impression that your game was affecting a campaign map moving, and that's kind of what you're getting at. I think that'd be awesome.
Yep, that's the goal. Yeah, so we've got a map with 36 different locations, and some of them, every major European nation I think starts with 4 locations. The natives start with a few more just because they're at a little bit of a disadvantage. They don't have quite as many players. But week to week, each location will generate victory points, and then players, as they play games, their submissions Also add victory points, and there are a series of commanders, and they can choose which locations to attack. Players can also vote for locations to attack and or defend, and so they can allocate bonus points by participating in the campaign to their nation. And then there's a system for resolving that combat week to week, and over time it just kind of builds on it. Each week kind of builds on the week prior, until there's an overall winner at the end.
That sounds awesome. I worry for you guys because I know how much time it took Joe to process all the data. But I imagine that there has to be a way to streamline that. There has to be a way to just kind of auto-populate some of the stuff as people submit things. Because I know he had to do a lot of it by hand. And I admire his tenacity, but there has to be a way for him to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah. So my day job is I'm a software developer. So we've got some stuff. All of the new stuff for the campaign, I've automated a vast majority of it. So there's a lot less work on a weekly basis, and we're looking at a lot of automation for the future. So hopefully next year, Joseph won't be staying up till ridiculous hours of the night just to process all the entries. We've kind of revamped some of that, so hopefully when an entry comes in, it will auto populate and feed into the data set that we're using that will ultimately drive the map on a week to week basis. So
I'm really glad Joe met you because I worry about Joe. Joe works too damn hard on too many projects, and that sounds awesome. So I'm psyched for this because I want to get in some games. I want to get in some games over the summer, and I want to watch the map move. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. This is going to be cool.
Hopefully, we've completed one full round of play testing, and we're actually in the middle. I think we're on week 4 at the time of the recording for the second round of play testing. We're just kind of running through the commander aspect of it, and using the player generated points from the previous year's campaigns as far as how many games were played and for which faction, and then simulating some elements of that to go through and try to get the bugs worked out and everything lined out so it's as smooth as possible for next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the automation and stuff. Not that I had a lot to do with it this year.
No, I just poured in battle reports and let him do all the work. So that was fine with me.
Yeah, I know there were plenty of 2 a.m., 5 a.m. nights, especially right before the weekly updates coming out, where everybody just suddenly decides to dump everything
Joe
in
would be
on
like,
Sunday
I'm
night.
publishing at 2 a.m. and I'd be like, your time or my time? He's like, oh no, I adjusted. That's your time. And I'm like, oh, why are you staying up till 5? He's like, it's fine. I have to get up at 7.
You poor man. So we plug your site every week, but let's talk about it. So talk about Timber and Sail. What inspired you to begin your site?
So part of it, like I said, Oak and Iron was probably my first real experience with Firelot games beyond just a basic demo in the past of Blood and Plunder. But once I started Oak and Iron and got to playing it, I started looking around. There wasn't a whole lot of community support out there. It kind of came out at a really lousy time where the whole world's on lockdown, and it kind of lost some of its momentum. And I felt like it was such a good game that it needed some love from the community. So I decided to try to piece together some strategy guides, some reviews for the ships, and just generate some content and try to stir it back up in hopes that it would help loop back and promote the game.
Yeah, it was definitely lacking because Blood and Plunder has several resources, and we've tried to cover Oak and Iron maybe 1 in 8 episodes, like once, twice a year.
That might be generous. It's a valid criticism that we haven't covered it enough because it is a great game. That's one of the reasons why we were psyched to have you on, because we know that you know the game backwards and forwards, and you've been doing a good job of building the community. So, we're psyched to have you talk about it. So, speaking of that, since you're somebody who's following very closely what's going on, I will excitedly say that as I record this, I checked on Facebook and I saw a picture of Mike Tunez with gangster glasses on, unloading the first Raise the Black off of the boat in Miami.
Yep.
But they have a lot going on with Oak and Iron stuff. So talk about what they've got coming out down the pike.
Sure. So I just put out an article semi-recently of some of the stuff that's coming soon for 2023. One of the biggest things is just the manufacturing process. Firelock Games has taken some hits from some of the Chinese production process and some of the lockdowns from COVID and whatnot, and so they've kind of chosen to invest in themselves and start doing some of the development in-house like they have in the past for some of their metal minis. And so they've invested in a newer technology. I don't know how familiar you are with it, with Silecast miniatures. It's a newer injection molding type process. And so they're in the process of switching all of the Oak and Iron lines over to that, is my understanding. And so it cranks up the quality a lot. I've got some preview pictures. Mike was generous enough to send me for one of the new third-rate frigates that they just recently cast. And so there's pictures side by side of the old mini and the new, and it's like watching TV in the 90s and then watching high def on some of it. The quality they can crank down in some little pieces is pretty phenomenal. So
I'm looking at your article, News and Miniatures coming soon for Oak and Iron in 2023. And aside from seeing the apparent uniform of the Firelock crew, yeah, I'm looking at these minis and comparing them side by side. It's just amazing the level of detail we're going to be seeing on these ships coming up.
Part of it, we're going to get better quality minis, hopefully a little bit faster turnaround time of production, because it's just going to be up to them to crank it out rather than have to wait for shipping from China. I know that Mike has said that they're still going to do some of the production in China, potentially for some of the older box sets. But I think the plan for everything new is to steadily move it all over to the newer technology, newer quality. And so part of that, the other thing, there's a few other things. We're going to get the ability to buy a single ship at a time of the different types. So instead of having to buy a box set of 3 to 6 minis, you can buy just the ones or twos of what you like. Or if you want to do an entire fleet of 30 third rates, then you can buy 30 third rates. Or I'm a big fan of Corvettes and 6th rates. I kind of fall into the camp for loving the boarding aspect of the game. So I like going fast and hard at my opponent and shredding them in boarding. Or I do the flip side and I'll take big ships of the line and just shred from cannons. I tend to go one extreme or the other and not a whole lot in the middle.
Well, I will say that we need to have you back on because I need your help building a list. So I'm going to pick your brain about it.
Yeah.
I will also tell listeners that I will link the article that we're talking about in the episode description. So we'll cross post from our site so we can drive some traffic your way, because he did a pretty good job of giving you the overview. So I'll let you check it out for yourself on his site. We have been talking for an hour, and it is a school night. So we're going to jump into the trivia unless there are any objections.
I was just going to ask, I was going to go through exactly which ships are coming out and ask Jason what his favorite is. So listed in the article, we have the English third-rate ship of the line, a full-size galleon, an Urca, a merchantman, a 5th-rate galley frigate, and the light 4th-rate. Which of these ships are you looking forward to most?
Oh, I think it's probably going to be counterintuitive, but I kind of like the potential for a full-size galleon, because I think it's got potential for it to be both a useful offensive weapon, but I think it's gonna be one of those you could potentially use it as a treasure ship. or treasure galleon and use it for objectives in some new scenarios. So I think that's one that's going to have a dual purpose. So it will potentially get more play time. Depending on what they're doing with the merchantman, I haven't seen the mini, but if it's merchantman's one of those, it's a generic term. So Mike hasn't leaked fully what all is in his head for that mini. It could be something where it's its own vessel, or it could be looped into like an Indiaman, where it's more like an East India trading company type ship. I think that one's got good potential to fill a role that's kind of that mid range. So it would be a good ship for smaller games and larger games. So I think that's definitely on the to buy list. And then I was going to say that the fifth rate galley. Again, Mike hasn't fully leaked it, but I'm expecting it to be another one of those that will fall into the category of like Blackbeard's Revenge, where we get some unique ships. So Blackbeard's Revenge comes with the Queen Anne's Revenge of Blackbeard, and then the Revenge from Stede Bonnet. The Adventure is William Kidd's flagship, and it's a fifth rate galley. So there's a high potential that we might get a new captain with that ship.
That's awesome. I was going to say, I'm noting that the full-size galleon, the Urca, and the merchantman are all larger ships, but they aren't rated as ships of the line, which makes sense. But notably, I know in our tournaments we tend to run the smaller scale. I think it's patrol, where it's 50 points. Oak and Iron games take surprisingly long. You wouldn't think it, but they do. It might be due to lack of familiarity with the player base, or I'm not sure what, but we only go to the 50-point games because
it's an odd deal to me that once the 50 point games actually sometimes take longer than a 100 or a 200 point game. And some of it gets because there's not as many guns on the table, and so there's not as much shooting, and you tend to dance around each other, or you don't do quite as much damage as quickly. When you start getting closer to a 100-point game, I think a 100-point game plays faster than a 50-point, which is completely counterintuitive. You might try it just to see, because people tend to upgrade their ship. They have a few more points to spend, and so you upgrade your ships a little bit. You add the additional guns you need, and maybe slap some Marines on there, or upgrades on your ship that you don't necessarily get in the 50 points. So they tend to deal out damage a little faster.
Well, I was going to note the those three that I mentioned, the Galleon, Urca, and Merchantman, are not ships of the line, so you can take them in those smaller games. Up till now, we've only seen people taking, the light galleon or sixth rates, fifth rates as their flagships, so to speak. With these, we might actually see a larger fleet as a 50-point. But I think once you get to 100-point games, they remove that requirement.
Yeah, so there is still, it depends on the faction. So pirates tend to have the limitation that they can't take ships of the line, and there are a few admirals, depending on the other faction that you play, where you're kind of limited, where you can't take a ship of the line. But by and large, like you said, once you get to 100 points, it's no holds bar. Just take what you want and pound the snot out of each other.
Well, like I said, we'll look into that one.
So with that, it's time to test our knowledge. This means it's my time to shine. I may not be a programmer, but I generally know my history. I should. I have a degree in it. And yet I'm frequently trumped by other people that are on this podcast. So so the question from last month / earlier this month, because I was really bad at getting stuff out, is as follows. Born around 1540, no one is really sure, to a family of farmers in England. Entering the world of sailing by his early 20s, he served aboard a slave ship that was attacked by the Spanish, which then quickly launched a career of becoming a bit of a terror on the high seas. He almost immediately entered the world of privateering, which in this case meant somewhat clandestine raids sanctioned by Queen Elizabeth I. In 1570, she commissioned him and 2 ships in a series of privateering raids on the Spanish, essentially to hijack some of their goods. Historians hotly debate whether or not this privateer made it to Oregon. Who is the pirate? The answer was Sir Francis Drake. We had 5 potential winners, and me
Come on,
and
guys.
Glenn have a deal.
It was a short month, but
Me
come
and
on.
Glenn have a deal. that if it's international, I get to deal with it, and if it's not, he gets to deal with it. So
Deal with it has the honor of delivering you your
that's
winnings.
fair. That's fair. I'm sorry that I treated this so poorly. All right, so I'm going to roll die, and the answer is it is number 5. It is Mel Swader.
Garrett.
Garrett slash Mel.
Garrett
Swader.
Swader.
So that means it's Georgia, which means it's yours. I
All
will
right.
I will kind of spoil something and say I too am participating in Adam Horton's Secret Santa, and I volunteered to ship internationally, and I will be sending a package to the Netherlands by the end of the month, probably right before Thanksgiving here in the United States. So if you're listening from Holland, then expect a package because it might be from me. And then we are giving the honor of asking this question to our guest speaker who came up with the question itself. So to remind people of the rules, which we will prompt you before we record this time because we usually get a flood of emails when we do that because everybody forgets. In order to answer the trivia question, you have to email talesofthesale@gmail.com before the next time we record, which will likely be relatively quick because we're going to try to get back on schedule. So we will warn you, but this will, if all goes according to plan, this should get released before Thanksgiving, and then we'll be recording probably by the end of the beginning of the second week of December because it's a weird way that it falls in terms of first, second, and third. So email talesofthesale@gmail.com before we record next time. And so go ahead and ask our question.
At one point in his career, this notorious pirate captain captured the city of Nassau and turned it into a pirate haven. However, his reign only lasted a few weeks because on the 22nd of July, 1718, Woodes Rogers, the new governor appointed by England for Nassau, arrived with several men of war and blockaded the harbor. Through deceitful negotiations, this captain turned one of his largest ships into a fire ship and sent it into the midst of the English fleet. He escaped during the ensuing chaos on a sloop named the Catherine, who was the captain.
All right. So stay tuned. We will find out. Prize.
I knew there was something I was forgotten to write in here.
What do you have? What do you have sitting around?
What don't I have? What, Jason? What do you think would be an appropriate prize for this? Pick like a two blisters.
Jason, what is your heart desire?
Or do you want to go with Oak and Iron
Chips? We need to give away Oak and Iron Chips for this.
Well, then I'm going to pick
Oak and Iron Chips to give away.
And I'll throw in. I tell you what. I'll throw in a second prize. So we'll draw twice. I'll throw in 12 custom Wake tokens that are 3D printed and I painted. And then I'll throw in a couple of 3D terrain islands and some rocks that I've just kind of hobbied and thrown together.
Well, there you go. I don't think that's 2 prizes from Jason. I don't know that I need to give away the.
Well, I mean, I'll throw that in as one prize. So, or if you want to split them, I can split them. It doesn't matter. We'll do both. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, so we'll have the terrain be one drawing, and we'll have the Oak and Iron Chips you've got be a second drawing. But so all the more reason for people to actually get into trivia answer this time because we're giving away a pile of stuff. It's not like when we gave away a sloop, but it's up there. This is some pretty sweet terrain, so we've been talking about it the whole episode. So get your answers in, and stay tuned to see who wins. I will remind people of upcoming events, Secret Santas. If you are participating and Adam Horton has given you your assignments, do not forget that you need to mail them by the first week of December to make sure they get to people by Christmas. Glenn, you want to talk about Cold Wars?
Yes, so HMGS Cold Wars is happening March 10th to 12th next spring, 2023. They just finally announced that right before Fall In. It will be happening at the Valley Forge Casino Resort. Due to a variety of things, I don't know what my I'm in the process of switching jobs right now, so I don't know what my work schedule is going to be like. Tom doesn't know his schedule. Firelock tends not to be at Cold Wars, and this host destination is a little further than we usually travel for these, at least from my end. So I can't guarantee that we're going to be running a tournament or anything there, but we will be happy to coordinate with anybody who is going there, if they would like to try and run something or get a game together or whatever we want to do. I'm trying to figure out the plan.
I won't know if I can go until early December, because so by the next podcast I'll know if I'm going to show up, and if I do, I'll probably run a convention game, but maybe not a full scale tournament, because I don't have.
I'd be happy running the C
Yeah, I might help do that. But yeah, if so, we will keep you posted as to whether or not we can go. I was also considering going to Adepticon, because Mitch had mentioned doing that. So we might do that instead, but they're both falling close to the same time. So I definitely can't do both. But I'm swamped with Model United Nations because that's like our busy season. And I have like 75 students that are traveling. So I'm usually busy February, March, and April. But I will try to make it work because it's always fun to see people, and I haven't been to a con since Historicon.
Oh, Adepticon is March 22nd to 26th, and Firelock is usually there. I can't see.
No, they won't miss Adepticon. They'll be there.
Because that's usually why they're not at Cold Wars.
And
Oh,
Jason,
sure.
do you want to do the honors and tell them about the sale?
Yeah, combination Black Friday, Cyber Monday
Friday sale,
through
baby.
November 28th. Anything you get from firelockgames.com is 25% off. The discounts applied at checkout. So perfect time to get into Oak and Iron or pick up some Blood and Plunder or Blood and Valor or Raise the Black since it's coming soon.
And I think that wraps us up for this month.
Well, let's not forget, go visit Timber and Sale.
Yeah, visit Timber and Sale. Huge thank you to Jason Klotz for being on with us. And yeah, Glenn, if you want to take us out.
Well, everyone, thanks as always for coming and listening to us. We can't do the show without you all, and we're always happy to talk at you. So we'll see you again next month, probably in like 3 weeks, because we're going to try and go for a shorter release period this time. But we will see you then. Have a good one.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.